Welcome to the Bridge Church Midweek podcast. We exist to connect people with others and God. We hope this week's episode helps you do just that. Enjoy.
Hey everybody, and welcome to the Bridge Church Midweek podcast. My name is Tyler Wolf, and I'm associate pastor as well as campus pastor at our Oconomowoc campus of Bridge Church. And it is good to be with you today to bring you a little bit of encouragement. This is a Pathway episode of the Midweek podcast. And if you don't know what Pathway is, it is essentially the blueprint for discipleship at Bridge Church. And it's a collection of 7 different practices that we believe everyone who follows Jesus should be involved in. Now, it's made up of things like daily prayer and Bible engagement and being spirit-led and self-denial. And one person might be more active in a practice than another person. But the idea here is that everyone would be involved on some level in all 7 practices. Why? Well, because Jesus did these things, or he commanded that his disciples do these things. And so these Pathway episodes of the podcast are designed to help you in your discipleship, and especially in the current focus that we are in as a church. And right now, our discipleship focus is on the practice of being spirit-led. So to break that down and look at each individual word, we see that we need an understanding of the Spirit, as well as an understanding of how to be led. And so today we're going to look at a specific function of the Spirit and then talk about how to follow the Spirit's leading in that function. And we see this function in the book of Ephesians, verse 22 of the 2nd chapter. So Ephesians 2:22 says this: "In him," meaning in Jesus, "you are also being built together into a dwelling place for God by the Spirit." Let me read that again. Ephesians 2:22 says, "In him you are also being built together into a dwelling place for God by the Spirit." Something really important is being told to us in this verse, and I want to explain it to you this way. Think about when you check into a hotel with maybe a family member or whatever. When you check into a hotel on vacation, there are kind of 2 types of people. Those who unpack right away, and then those who don't, right? So sometimes I'll unpack when I get into a hotel, but usually, like, if my wife and I get to a hotel, she will begin unpacking her bag and putting it into the drawers. And she'll look over and I'm like in my swimming suit, ready to go swimming, right? Because she wants to prepare the room for our stay there. And I think that's a decent picture of what is being taught to us in Ephesians chapter 2 here, is throughout our life, a function of God's Spirit within us is doing something like unpacking and organizing and cleaning and preparing the room for who? Well, for God himself. Another helpful way to think about this is when you think about like the nesting stage of a woman's pregnancy. So the nesting phase is the stage in a pregnancy where a woman may feel this like intense urge to prepare the house for the baby's arrival. And so this can be things like organizing the house, cleaning the house, preparing a nursery. And this is a great way to think about the function of the Holy Spirit in Ephesians 2:22, organizing and cleaning the house. So how do we follow the Spirit's lead in this? Well, it's actually really simple if we let it be. When you feel conviction, like you have that negative feeling regarding maybe a behavior, it's as simple as saying, okay, let me listen to that feeling. Let me listen to that conviction. And when you sense a desire to grow in a certain area, 2 Timothy encourages you to do something called fan the flame of the Spirit. And so thinking physically, what happens when you fan a flame? Well, it gets bigger because you are investing something into it. So I encourage you to invest into whatever desire may feel is coming out of nowhere when it comes to growing closer to being the image of Jesus. And this can happen through books, this can happen through sermons, this can happen through asking questions of mature believers around you. But as I close, let me point out 2 things in Ephesians 2:22. Number 1, it says making a home out of your heart, right? It says he is making a dwelling place for God by the Spirit. And the reason I emphasize this word making is just to say that it's a process. It's a lifelong process. It's really, really easy to want to hurry up and be more perfect than we already are, but we can look at the book of Ephesians in the 2nd chapter here and go, oh no, God's in a lifelong process of making me who he wants me to be. He has grace for me now, the way that I am now. But it's also written to a group of people. This book of Ephesians is a letter written to a whole church. And so what it says happens in our hearts also happens in the house of God, in the church. And this really should cause us to think twice about anytime that we want to become critical of the church. And I mean the global church. We want to say this is wrong or that is wrong. And I go, man, think about it literally. When you walk into someone's house, you would never just become critical of all the things that are wrong. In fact, you would point out the things that you like. And you would remain positive about someone else's house, because the truth is, according to the gospel, we are not our own. We've been bought with a price. And so this house of mine, both in my heart, as well as the church that I get to serve in and belong in, man, it belongs to God. And so I want to be really, really careful about how I speak about it critically, going, man, this is someone else's house. This doesn't belong to me. And so I'm going to speak highly of myself, and I'm not going to destroy myself with my own words. And I'm also going to speak highly of the church, knowing this is God's house. You can find out everything else you need to know about the Pathway, again, which is a blueprint for discipleship, at bcpathway.life. And we're always updating that with new sermons and material and questions to be asking you and your bridge group. And we're also putting a new resource on every page within the Pathway website called a Pathway Scale. And basically, it's really simple. It is 7 different practices with a scale of 1 to 10 for you to circle, to essentially grade yourself and say, oh man, in self-denial, let's say I fast every 90 days, so I would give myself a 4. And you would go through and you would essentially grade yourself on all 7 of the practices. And then I encourage you to look and go, hey, which one is the lowest? And what can I do to move from a 2 to a 3 or a 7 to an 8? It's a really simple way of just saying, Lord, where do you want to work in my life? And that's a great exercise in order to do that. All right, that's this week's Midweek podcast. Thank you so much for who you are and for allowing the Spirit to lead you in your heart and to make a dwelling place for God in you and in your church. Have a great rest of your day.